Yes, good morning. Welcome to today's class, Botany, second year. So, in last class, we discussed about the role of macro and micronutrients. Role of macro and micronutrients. What is the use of micro and macronutrients in the life of the plant? So, the macro and micronutrients play a major role in the life cycle of the plants, in the physiological activities of the plants. The macro and micronutrients are which involve initiation of activation of enzymes, and also which maintain the permeability of the membrane and concentration grade of the solute, electron transport system, buffering action, enzyme action. So like that it plays an important role in metabolic activities of the plants. Then the form and function in which the macro and micro are observed and what are the functions. So one of the macronutrients we discussed in last class, that is the nitrogen. It is the nitrogen which requires in greatest amount by all parts of the plant. Nitrogen requires in greatest amount by all parts of the plant, which is absorbed from the soil in the form of NO3 minus nitrate, and also sometimes it is also absorbed in the form of nitrite and ammonium. So the nitrogen is the major constituent of the plasma membrane, proteins, nucleic acids, amino acids, enzymes, vitamins, hormones, etc. This is what we discussed in last. Then phosphorus, which is observed from the soil, which is obtained from the soil in the form of phosphate, H2PO4 minus or HPO4 2 minus. So the phosphorus is partly present in the proteins, nucleic acids, and it requires all energy evolving reactions, that is phosphorylation which require in all phosphorylation reactions. Then potassium, what we discussed here. Potassium obtained in the form of potassium ions. So it is a major constituent in the leaves, buds, flowers, and root tip. The potassium maintain anion cation balance in the cell. Potassium anion cation balance. And also the potassium which is help in protein synthesis. So it regulates the opening and closing of stomata and maintain the turgidity of cell and activate some enzymes which involve metabolic activities. Then calcium, which is absorbed in calcium ions. It is a major constituent in the meristematic tissue, differentiating tissues, meristematic tissue, differentiating tissues, and also in the root tip, So, the calcium is required for the synthesis of cell wall, particularly in the form of calcium pectate as middle lamellae, and also help in mitotic spindle formation during the cell division. So, the large amount of calcium accumulate in the old leaves. It maintains the permeability of the cell. It's involved in maintaining the permeability of the cell. And also, an important aspect of the calcium is which involve in catalysis of water in photosynthesis. Then sulfur. Sulfate ions. So, which observed in sulfate ions. The sulfur is present in two amino acids, cysteine and methionine. So, the sulfur which involve formation of the disulfide bridges during the proteins, which stabilize the protein structure. Then magnesium. So, manganese divalent, Mg plus divalent ions. So, it is an important element to activate the enzymes which involve in both photosynthesis and respiration. So, the magnesium maintains the ring form structure of the chloroplast. So, it maintains the ribosomes binding. The ribosomes are the two units of ribosomes are bind together with the help of magnesium. Then iron. Iron which is obtained from the soil in the form of ferric Fe3+. Comparatively, these six are macronutrients. It is a micronutrient. Iron is a micronutrient. Comparatively, the iron requires in greatest amount comparatively other micronutrients. So, the iron which is involved in electron transport proteins, that is cytochrome, ferredoxin and cytochrome. So, the ferrous which is associated with the proteins transport the electrons, that is cytochrome and ferredoxin. It shows reversible oxidize. It is a reversible oxide. Ferrous is a reversible oxide from ferrous to ferric, Fe2 plus to Fe3 plus. During the oxidase process, it shows reversible oxidase process from ferrous to ferric during the transport of electrons. The iron involved in protein synthesis and also which involve in chloroplast synthesis. So, it activates the enzyme catalase. The iron which activates the enzyme catalase. Catalase enzyme is activated by the iron. Catalase activates the catalase enzyme. So, this in last class we discussed that. So, the further manganese, micronutrient manganese. In which form it is observed? Let me see. Manganese. So, which observed 8 So it is observed in the manganese, Mn plus, manganese ions, manganese. So it activates the both, they activate so many enzymes which involve in photosynthesis, respiration and nitrogen metabolism. It activates the enzymes, many types of enzymes which involve in photosynthesis, respiration and nitrogen metabolism. So manganese, it observed in the form of manganese ions from the soil. It activates so many enzymes which involve in photosynthesis, respiration and nitrogen metabolism. Then an important defined function of the manganese is an important defined function of the manganese is that which involve in liberation of the oxygen during the photolysis in photosynthesis. Liberation of oxygen by photolysis Babu. So manganese, the defined function of the, a specific defined function of the manganese is which involve in liberation of oxygen by photolysis of water in during the photosynthesis. So it activates the enzyme indole acetic acid carboxylase, indole acetic acid IAA carboxylase. So that is the manganese. Manganese which are obtained in the form of manganese ions. Then it activates the enzymes. Enzymes which involve in photosynthesis, respiration, nitrogen metabolism, and the specific function of the manganese is liberation of oxygen by photolysis during the photosynthesis. It activates the enzyme indole acetic acid carboxylase or enolase. Then zinc observed in the form of zinc ions. Zinc observed in the form of Zn plus ion. Zinc which is observed in the form of zinc ions. So it activates the enzyme carboxylase. It is needed for synthesis of amino acids. So the zinc is essential. The zinc ions are required. For synthesis of amino acids. This is the zinc. Zinc obtained in the form of zinc ions. It activates the carboxylase enzyme. Zinc is required for synthesis of amino acids. Then copper. Which is obtained from the soil in the form of cupric ions. So the copper observed from the soil in the form of cupric ions. So the copper is essential over all physiological activity, which is involved in all types of physiological, which is required in all types of physiological activities of the plant. So which influence the overall reactions. So like iron, the copper also associated with some proteins, during the electron transport, So the copper, like iron, the copper is also associated with some proteins which carry the electrons, So it is also shows a reversible oxidized process during the electron transport. That is Q plus 2. Cupric. It is also shows reversible oxidized from Q plus to cupric during the electron transport. So the copper also associate with the electron transport proteins. So that is cytochrome, plastocyanin in photosynthesis. That copper which is obtained from the soil in the form of cupric, it influences the overall metabolic activities of the plant, and like iron, it is also associated with some proteins during the electron transport, and it shows reversible oxidized process, that is from cuprous to cupric during the electron transport. So it is present in the electron carrier, which is associated with the electron transport carriers in chloroplast, plastocyanin. Okay. Next, boron. So which obtained from the soil, borate or diborate? In the form of borate or diborate. It is absorbed in the form of borate ions or diborate ions. So it is also it is an important, which is major constituent in for the germination of pollen grains, differentiating tissue, meristematic tissue. The diborates are required for absorption of the calcium, and also which is required for translocation of the sugars. Boron is which is absorbed in borate or diborate form ions, and it is a major constituent in the meristematic tissue, differentiating tissue, germination, pollen germination, and cell elongation. So which is required for absorption of the calcium, to maintain the permeability of membrane, and also the boron is required for translocation of sugars through the phloem. Then molybdenum. Then molybdenum. Molybdate ions. Which are observed in the form of molybdate ions. Molybdenum is an essential element to activate the enzymes like nitrogen reductase and nitrase enzymes, which are an important enzymes for protein synthesis, during the protein synthesis. So that is the molybdenum. Calcium, chlorine, which is observed in the form of chloride ions. So chlorine is an essential element to observe along with absorption of the calcium and sodium, to maintain the concentration of the solute, concentration gradient of the solute. So an important function of the chlorine is it is also involved in liberation of oxygen by photolysis during the photosynthesis. Then the next one is nickel, which is recently identified 17th essential element. It activates an enzyme urease. Which is also involved in protein synthesis, which is also essential in protein synthesis. And also it induces the disease resistance activity. It induces the disease resistant activity in the plants. So it induces the disease resistant activity, some disease resistant activity in plants. So these are the macro and micronutrients which are observed in different forms and play an important role and function in the plant metabolism. Then the deficiency symptoms of the nutrients. Deficiency symptoms of the nutrient elements. When the supply of mineral or nutrient is limited, the growth of the plant is retarded, stopped. When the supply of mineral nutrients are become limited, the growth of the plant is retarded. The mineral nutrient which concentration is below, nutrient which is limit and stop the or retard the plant growth, the below concentration of the nutrient, which is retard the plant growth, the below concentration of the nutrient is called critical concentration. The below concentration of the nutrient is called critical concentration. When the supply of mineral nutrient is limited, the plant growth is retarded. The mineral concentration which concentration which is retard the plant growth, the below concentration is called critical concentration. Now the mineral element can be said to be deficient when it is below the critical concentration. The mineral deficiency, it can be said, now it is said to be, the mineral nutrient said to be deficient. The mineral nutrient said to be deficient when it is below critical concentration. So the element said to be deficient when it is below critical concentration. Then it is a deficiency of mineral element. When the supply of the mineral nutrients are limited, the plant growth is retarded. The concentration of the mineral nutrient which stop the which retard the growth. That below concentration is known as, below concentration of mineral concentration is called critical concentration. Now, the mineral nutrient said to be deficient when it is below critical concentration. Since the mineral nutrients play one or more major roles in the plant growth. If any mineral nutrient becomes deficient, it causes some morphological changes. When a mineral nutrient becomes limited or below, it causes so many morphological changes in the plant. These changes are indicative of the deficiency of the mineral. That deficiency of mineral, which is known as deficiency symptoms. Since the minerals play one or more major role in the plant. When the mineral nutrient becomes limited, deficient, it shows some morphological changes. It causes some morphological changes. Those morphological changes are indicative of the deficiency of the mineral, nutrient. Such symptoms are called deficiency symptoms. That is called deficiency symptom of the nutrient. Deficiency symptom of the nutrients. Yes, the deficiency of the mineral nutrient can be removed by providing the deficient mineral nutrient. The deficiency symptoms can be vanished or removed by providing the deficient nutrient. As if the deficiency mineral nutrient is continued, finally the plants lead to die. The deficiency symptoms of the plant pots moreover depends on the type of mineral element. Moreover depends on the mobility of the mineral element. The deficiency symptoms of the plant pots depends on the mobility of the mineral nutrients. The mineral nutrients which are easily remobile, the minerals which are readily mobilize. The symptoms appear for remobiling elements. The symptoms appear first in older leaves. For example, magnesium, phosphorus, chlorine, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, for which deficiency symptoms first appear in older leaves than younger leaves, because the minerals are translocate from older parts to younger parts. Now we can conclude the class today here. Thank you.